When life gets unpredictable, preparation matters. In medicine, it's all about staying alert, ready for whatever comes through the door. On the road, it's no different. That's why Volvo designs vehicles to help anticipate risk, reduce harm, and protect lives. The Volvo XC90's advanced safety systems inspire confident decisions wherever the road takes you. The Volvo XC90, for life. Proud sponsor of the Pit Podcast. Learn more at volvocars.ca/safety.
Let's focus on Canada and the monarchy and what's happening also in Barbados. Barbados has decided to drop the Queen as head of state and ditch the monarchy. Could Canada follow suit? With more on this, let's head over to Carolyn Harris, a royal historian and the author of Raising Royalty, 1,000 Years of Royal Parenting. Carolyn, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
Can you take us through the decision that just happened in Barbados? What did the government there decide?
Well, in Barbados and in Jamaica as well, there has been talk for some years about transitioning from a Commonwealth realm where the Queen is head of state and there is an elected prime minister as head of government, transitioning from that constitutional monarchy to a republic where the Queen would be acknowledged as head of the Commonwealth, but she would no longer be head of state. Barbados celebrated 50 years of independence in 2016, and that seems to have increased calls, particularly from various political figures, to enact this transition from monarchy to republic. In Barbados, the process of abolishing the monarchy requires a 2/3 vote in the House of Assembly, and right now the Barbados Labour Party controls 29 of the 30 seats, so they're in a position to enact political change, and there is the symbolic circumstance that in the past few years Barbados celebrated those 50 years of independence. The process would be much more complicated in Canada, but in theory at least, it's a fairly straightforward process in Barbados.
So that's why a decision like that can be made. We've had talk here, it seems to come up on air here every now and again. There's this question, should Canada either ditch the Queen as head of state or ditch the monarchy? It comes up every now and again, but it seems like it's way more complex in Canada. You mentioned 2/3 majority in Barbados, and they've got pretty much all the seats now in their parliament. But in Canada, take us through the process, Carolyn. What would really need to happen if Canada wanted to take those steps?
A lot of different things. According to paragraph 41A of the Constitution Act 1982, changes to the office of the Queen require a unanimous constitutional amendment. So all 10 provinces would have to agree to the abolition of the monarchy, and it's very difficult to get all 10 provinces on the same page for constitutional change. So there's the matter of the provinces agreeing, and then there are other complexities that would emerge that First Nations treaties, for example, there's about 70 of them that date from 1701 to 1923. These original treaties, they were negotiated with the Crown. So the issue would arise if Canada was transitioning to a new form of government, would this reopen negotiations regarding these treaties? So there would be complications regarding First Nations treaty rights and how these treaties would go forward. Another issue, and this came up in Australia, which had a referendum regarding the future of the monarchy in 1999, would be the question of what system of government would replace the constitutional monarchy. Would there be an appointed head of state? Would the Governor General simply step into that role as head of state rather than representative of the head of state? Would there be an elected head of state, or would the head of state and the head of government become the same person? And this is an issue that came up in Australia, that there was a lot of debate over whether in a new form of government there would be an elected or an appointed head of state alongside the elected head of government. And it's one of the reasons why the vote in that referendum was in favor of the Queen, as Australians could not agree on what the new form of government would be. So it would be quite a complicated process here, as has been the case in some of the other Commonwealth realms.
We're with Carolyn Harris, a royal historian. Carolyn, you bring up a great point, right? If you had to do this in Canada and you had to get all 10 provinces on board, boy,
Yes.
on some days you would think the 10 provinces couldn't agree on what color the sky is, right? So good luck with constitutional reform. But I got to ask you, Carolyn, you probably do you love the monarchy? Are you a proponent of the monarchy? As
I think constitutional monarchy is an effective system of government. You have a level of government that's above party politics, and I think that's useful in terms of limiting partisanship. And I also think that the Queen has done an admirable job over her very long reign, and she's taken her role as head of the Commonwealth and this international role that she has as head of state of 16 Commonwealth realms very seriously.
I think you bring up a wonderful point there. Like Queen Elizabeth, I think many people have an affinity for her. And even if you're not a fan, let's say, of a monarchy, you can say, well, at least, Queen Elizabeth has had that role for so long and done it so well. I wonder if, and I'd love your thoughts on this, Carolyn, when it's no longer Queen Elizabeth, and who's next in line, by the way? Is it Charles?
Yes, next
Yeah.
in line would be Charles, and then William, and then George. There's three generations of direct heirs to the throne, as there was in the last years of Queen Victoria's reign in the 1890s. And as with Queen Victoria's reign, it's very difficult to imagine anyone else in that role. And in fact, when Queen Victoria died in 1901, there was a lot of skepticism directed towards her 59-year-old son, the new King Edward VII, as up until this time he'd been known for going to the races and going to a lot of country house parties and being mixed up in a few divorce cases. So he was associated with royal scandals, and there was real questions as to whether he'd be able to step into his mother's shoes. But Edward VII carved out a role for himself as a diplomat and traveled quite widely in Europe. And now we talk about the first decade of the 20th century as the Edwardian era. So right now, certainly it's difficult to imagine someone else who's not Queen Elizabeth II in that role, but this is a role that Prince Charles has been training for his whole life, and he may well exceed all the expectations and concerns that come with a change in reign.
Mm-hmm. Carolyn, as you look across the Commonwealth, I know you mentioned Jamaica as well off the top when we were discussing Barbados, but as you look at the Commonwealth, how stable is it? Are there any other weaknesses, countries that are also looking at this?
Well, as I mentioned before, Jamaica, as with Barbados, is another country that has discussed becoming a republic in the past. Around the time of the Queen's Diamond Jubilee in 2012, the then Jamaican Prime Minister, Portia Simpson Miller, expressed her personal admiration for the Queen, that this wasn't a matter of repudiating the Queen on a personal level, but thought that the time had come in Jamaican politics for transition to a republic. This process didn't really get underway. Prince Harry had a very successful tour of Jamaica in 2012 around the time of the Jubilee. But there remains a possibility that if Barbados successfully transitions from realm to republic, that Jamaica might do the same. Jamaica has other complications as well. It's important to note we think of the Queen as head of state in 16 Commonwealth realms. These are 16 very different offices. And in Jamaica, legal cases can still be appealed all the way to London, which is not the case in Barbados, where legal cases cannot go beyond the Caribbean Court of Justice. So I think there's a sense in Jamaica of there still being, particularly with their legal system, this very clear tie to Britain. So that may well inform Republican sentiment going forward. And it's possible Jamaica might follow in the footsteps of Barbados, but that remains to be seen going forward.
Carolyn, really fascinating. I could talk to you about this stuff all day. I mean, really, it's fascinating to hear you talk about the royalty and the monarchy. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
Carolyn Harris is a royal historian. She's also the author of Raising Royalty, 1,000 Years of Royal Parenting.